Hey guys, it's Will. It's Hong Kong Cinema Appreciation Society. Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to the back of the van. What are we here to talk about today? It's The Last Blood. Hell yeah, aka Hard Boiled 2, a title that some people really don't like. I'll talk about that as I get into the video here. This was released by 88 Films in October of 2023. The movie originally ran in theaters in Hong Kong in March of 1991. It was out from March 14th until March 29th of 1991, so it was out for a couple weeks. It came out about a year before Hard Boiled, despite being called Hard Boiled 2 on the UK home video release. If you're new to the channel, thanks for finding us and welcome, and a huge shout out to our patrons who do so much to support this channel. I mean, the Battle Creek Brawl release that I reviewed was purchased with Patreon money, and Fatal Termination, which is now up in Patreon as an early release but will be coming to YouTube soon, as so many of the releases that you see me review on here are purchased with money that is very generously donated to the channel from our awesome patrons. So huge shout out to them and thank you so much. I do early release videos in there and wicked early release videos and exclusives, and the link is down below if you feel like giving $2 a month or $5 a month for like the tiers we have right now. But I mean, obviously no pressure, but to the people who do give, thank you so much for enabling the channel. So this movie was written and directed by Wong Jing. It was directed by Eric Sang, who's also in the film, and I think Wallace Chung was the other producer. It was produced through, if I'm understanding this correctly, it was produced through a production company that was set up by Eric Sang and Alan Tam, who is on the cover and is one of the stars of the film. There's Alan Tam right there. There's Andy Lau right there. And there's Eric Sang right there, actually. There's a really fun cast in this film. You also have Lung Kar-yan Beardy, who's I really like his performance and his character in this film. We have Mei Lo Mei Mei and La Shu Kei, who's in like friggin' everything from that era. He's in like School on Fire, and he's in The Big Heat, Wild Search, A Better Tomorrow 2. He typically plays like cops, doctors, judges, like kind of like late middle-aged male authority figure types, but you'll recognize him like immediately as soon as this movie starts. I didn't know his name before I watched this, but I was looking at the credits and I clicked on his name and I was like, oh yeah, duh, that guy. So he's in like everything. And then something that I thought was actually really interesting about this movie, I was looking at the credits for it while I was getting ready to make this video. It was the DP, director of photography / cinematographer on this film, was Jingle Ma. So he shot, I looked up his credits, he shot The Iceman Cometh, Drunken Master 2, First Strike, God of Cookery, Pom Pom and Hot Hot, Viva Erotica, Comrades a Love Story, and he directed Tokyo Raiders, Seoul Raiders, Europe Raiders, and he directed Silver Hawk with Michelle Yeoh. So quite a career that he had. So I'm going to give you like a nutshell kind of reaction to this film, and I'm going to give you the kind of plot synopsis. I'm going to show off the physical release here, and then I'll get into more details and talk in more detail about the commentary track that's on here. That's really kind of like the main bonus feature. There are a couple trailers and there's like a stills gallery, but the commentary track is really like the main supplemental thing that's on here. So I like really quick review here to just, if you just want to like hear my basic thoughts on this and get out of here. I really wasn't feeling well last night. I'm not feeling well again today. If you see me profusely sweating, it's actually a very nice temperature in the car. I'm really not feeling well. And so last night I was like, just like throw on The Last Blood and see if I can get through it. Or I was worried I was going to like fall asleep during the movie because I'm really kind of feeling like I have a bad cold or something like that. And this movie was like exactly what I needed, honestly. It's like a perfect, like middle of the road, like whatever, 2.5, 3-star movie that's got really charming cast, like great stars in it with Alan Tam. I really like Alan Tam as an actor. I really liked him in Dragon Family. I loved him in Esprit d'Amour, which is the first Ringo Lam film. I just really like his on-screen presence and his charm. He's in Armor of God. He's great in that. Obviously, I love Andy Lau. I love Beardy. There's just a really charming cast in this film, and it's a very simple story to follow, and it's got a shitload of action in it. Like, Blackie Ko was the action director, who's quite a name in the industry at that time, and there's a freaking fantastic car chase in this movie. There's lots and lots of shootouts. it's just really fun, like, turn your brain off that era Hong Kong entertainment. I'm a huge fan of heroic bloodshed films, which you'll know if you watch this channel, and like Girls with Guns movies and other like shoot 'em up type of films from that era. And so this was just like, this is like right in my wheelhouse, and it's not like an exemplary film. It's not a film I really need to like go into tons of detail analyzing and picking apart, though I will go into a little bit more detail on certain things about it that I really liked. But it's really just like an entertaining, very solid, like I said, middle of the road. Like it's not like, you know, it's not hard boiled, but it's also not like a really junky movie. It's like perfect right in the middle, solid entertainment, heroic bloodshed film. So the plot of the story, like I said, it's a very easy film to follow. Like there were times where because I wasn't feeling well, I kind of like drifted. My kind of like attention span kind of drifted a bit, and then I came back into the movie and I was like, yeah, I know exactly where I am. Like it's not super complicated. So although interestingly, there are two kind of groups of characters rather than having a single protagonist. You have the bad guys, then you have kind of two groups of good guys. So you have Alan Tam and Beardy, who is, where is he on the artwork? Because he's like one of the main characters in the film. I think this is him down at the bottom here. And they are partners and cops in Singapore. So the whole movie takes place in Singapore, which is cool. I'll talk about that in a minute too. So it doesn't take place in Hong Kong. So the two of them are cops. And this Lama from Tibet, so he's kind of like the Dalai Lama, but he's not actually the Dalai Lama by name, but essentially this like holy Buddhist monk figure is coming to Singapore, and there's a concern that a Japanese terrorist group is going to try to assassinate him. So he comes to Hong Kong, and this is like a minor spoiler, but not really, because this basically sets up the whole plot of the movie. He gets shot, but he doesn't die, but he has a very rare blood type, and there's only like, I think like 5 people in Singapore who have that blood type. And then simultaneously, Andy Lau, who's like this street punk, like low-level triad kind of guy from Hong Kong, is on vacation in Singapore with his girlfriend, and his girlfriend gets injured. And she has the same rare blood type as this Lama. So Alan Tam and Beardy are looking for the people who have this blood type, but Andy Lau really wants to find them too, because he feels as though, oh, well, you know, there's this like really important political dignitary, religious dignitary who's in town, and the doctors and the cops or whatever are going to favor him. So I need to find these people so that I can save my girlfriend. And so they're kind of like on the same mission, and they're sort of working together, but they sort of butt heads with one another. But that's like the plot basically in a nutshell. I freaking love this artwork by Sean Longmore. It's so fiery and so red, and I love the renderings of the characters there. And then you pull it out and you get the same thing here on the slim case. I do like these slim cases. I mean, I know I live in the US, and so we typically have these types of cases on our standard releases. I know some people in the UK don't like them as much. But then there's the reversible art, which is that, if you can see it. It's like kind of like old school style poster there. And then there's it comes with a poster. There's no booklet on this one, but the poster is nice. And I know some people like framing these, or they put them in binders. It's not like super big, but so that's like the Hong Kong artwork there. And there's that artwork there. And so so that's basically the physical release, and that's the story of the movie in a nutshell and my basic thoughts on it. So let me get into some deeper thoughts on this movie. There is a couple characters in this movie I really liked. The Beardy character and the Alan Tam character in particular, I thought were really well written. And the reason for that is that they give them quirks. And this is like a really simple way to make characters more interesting. You just give them small little character traits that stick in the audience's mind, that help the audience to find that person, but then also makes them more relatable as a human being. Let me give you some really famous examples of this, and then I'll talk about how it's used in this film. James Bond, right? He says his name, Bond, James Bond. He has the martini, shaken not stirred, right? And he's got the Walther PPK, and he's got the white tuxedo, and he drives the Aston Martin, except for a little bit in the Pierce Brosnan era when he was driving BMWs. But Indiana Jones is another very good example, right? He's got the whip, he's got the hat, he's afraid of snakes. Like small things like that make the character seem more human and multidimensional, even though they're very simple to do as a writer, right? The Beardy character in this movie has 7 daughters, and his wife is pregnant again. All he wants is a son, and he keeps impregnating his wife, hoping that a son is going to come, and he keeps getting daughters. And he's like a chain smoker, but his daughters have asked him to give up smoking, so he's got a fake cigarette in his mouth because he's like addicted to the feeling of smoking, but he wants to cut it out for health reasons. Those are really good character quirks. He also curses like a sailor. The reason that's funny is that the Alan Tam character's quirk is that he doesn't like it when people swear. He thinks it's rude, and he thinks it's just like not something that you do as like an adult in polite society. That's a really funny character quirk for a cop because he's going around blowing people away, right? Like there's so many shootouts in this movie and he kills so many people, but he doesn't like it when people swear. It's just a really, really good character quirk. The other character dynamic I really liked here is that the Eric Sang character, he's one of the people with the rare blood type, and it's not really a spoiler. And so they're looking for him, right? And in the midst of the story, he runs into an ex-girlfriend of his, and there's this really good moment where they kind of recognize each other, and they're like, "Oh, how are you?" And like, it obviously, like, it kind of didn't, like, they both have fond memories of one another, and he's like, "Oh, you should go and see my mom, like, she really misses you." And like, they have this really nice moment, and their relationship going forward in the film carries a lot of emotional weight that really helps ground the movie, because the movie does have a lot of really kind of silly comedy in it, right? Because Eric Sang is in it. It's a Wong Jing film. Tonally, it kind of reminds me of Yes, Madam. And it has like really serious kind of violent stuff in it, but then it has really goofy stuff in it too. And interestingly enough, Andy Lau often gets involved in the comedic hijinks and like the comic relief in this film, which is like an atypical kind of role for him. His character does not stand out as much to me as some of the other characters in this film. It kind of seems like a generic Andy Lau character, like charming, handsome, low-level street criminal guy who's prone to violence, but is also like thoughtful and romantic. And like, that's, you know, it's like, it's a moment of romance. It's As Tears Go By. It's On the Wrong Track. Like, you know, even movies like Gun and Rose, and like, what was the one with Anita Yoon? I'm not going to remember the name off the top of my head, but like, he's been in a lot of those types of movies and played a lot of those types of roles. And this character doesn't really stand out to me above any of those other characters, but he does play it well. He's very charming and he's a very great screen presence. But I think the other characters are kind of more interesting, and it adds emotional weight to the film, but also just makes it more human. And so it makes it more relatable. There's a lot of action in this movie. Like I said, the car chase is freaking fantastic. There's a shootout in an apartment that is really, because you know, it's a very claustrophobic space, right? In an apartment. And then when you get like this eruption of violence and shooting, and you know, there's like a refrigerator falls over, like it's a very claustrophobic space with lots of people firing guns, and it's really well orchestrated, violent. Like, it's a really, really good, crazy little sequence that I really appreciated. I'm just looking at my notes here to see, I mean, I did write down, if you don't like dumb humor, you probably won't like it. Like I said, it really is kind of like Yes, Madam, and that, you know, in that movie you have the Choi Hart character, and you have like some characters who are kind of, you have John Shum and you have Mong Hoi, and they're kind of like goofy, right? And so but the tone of that movie is pretty dark and serious and violent, especially towards the end. This movie is actually not as dark and brutal and violent as that movie in the way it kind of comes to a conclusion, but it does have, it's almost kind of like this mainstream 90s action movie thing that you also have in 80s action films, where you want to have like, you want to make it relatable and you want to have the emotional weight to it, but you also want to make it funny and goofy and entertaining. And Sammo Hung films do this too, where they vacillate between kind of more serious and violent and more goofy or emotional, and like Heart of Dragon does that and stuff like that. So it's something that you'll be familiar with if you've seen a fair number of Hong Kong films. Something else that I thought was interesting about this movie is that there are times when like the action set pieces get so over the top that I almost wonder if it's like Wong Jing is like doing like a straight-faced like parody or satire of like heroic bloodshed films and how ridiculous they got as the violence got like more and more escalated and the set pieces got more and more ridiculous. And I apologize. It's like actually really nice temperature-wise in the car, but I'm not feeling well, so I'm like really sweaty and nasty. But there are moments where I'm like, is this a joke? Like, it gets the violence and it's not that it's super gory. There are some pretty violent, like, not violent, like gory, disgusting. There's some pretty bloody, like, kills and stuff like that. But there's like scenes of like, there's like a scene where Alan Tam like jumps down a staircase, catches a banister, and then like flips back up and is shooting people. It's just like, it's kind of ridiculous. And you're like, is it serious or is it not? Like, I couldn't really tell. Oh, the setting in Singapore, actually, I thought was really well done. It's interesting because it has a different texture. Like, it feels like a Hong Kong film from that era, so it'll hit your nostalgia buttons and stuff like that. But Singapore is just, it has a very different texture and feel than Hong Kong. It's a very different place. And so you get just like a different feeling to the film. That's kind of all I can describe it as. But it's really interesting. It's an interesting little twist. There's a final shootout in a hospital, which is, again, I think one of the parallels people draw between this film and Hard Boiled. But because there's like a final climactic shootout in a hospital that is very similar to Hard Boiled. It's interesting how similar it is in certain respects, and it's really well done. It's not John Woo, right? So it's not as well done as Hard Boiled is, but it's a good, fun, violent, exciting, like tense action sequence. I think that's a pretty good run through of my thoughts on this film. There's some pretty funny stuff, but there's like a doctor who's supposed to go on a date with this very attractive woman, and he has to cancel the date because of all the drama that's going on at the hospital. And he like ends up like being kind of a bodyguard, like babysitter to the llama guy, and there's like some pretty funny scenes between the two of them where there's a couple things where I laughed out loud at that were pretty funny between those two guys. But it's just a silly, fun, violent action comedy type of movie. And then you get it. So the commentary track by Frank Zhang and John Charles is really like the main bonus thing here. And I really enjoyed this commentary track. Frank talks about the title, what is the title in the original language, and how it ended up being Hard Boiled 2. And John Charles actually apparently spoke to Ricky Baker about how it became Hard Boiled 2 in the UK. And then they talk about how it's like, I think it's Hard Boiled 3 in Germany, and there's some other movie that's Hard Boiled 2. Like, it's really interesting to hear all the stuff about the titles. They talk about Alan Tam. There's a really interesting story about how Frank was in Hong Kong when Dragon Family came out, which is a movie I love that Alan Tam and Andy Lau were also both in. And that was like the first, I guess, really kind of violent movie that Alan Tam was in. And Frank talks about like how the audience reacted to that, knowing Alan Tam as like a cantopop star, someone who had been in comedies, romances, like stuff like that, seeing him like dual wielding the pistols, like blowing people away. They talk about like the circumstances of it being shot in Singapore, why it was shot there, how that worked and stuff like that. Frank talks about how you could never make this movie now. I'm not going to go into the reasons for that, but it's pretty interesting discussion and breakdown. They talk about Eric Sang quite a bit in his career and his on-screen persona, his ability as an actor, and that kind of stuff. So the movie is Hard Boiled 2, which is really The Last Blood, is like really the official English language title. Out from 88 Films in both Region A and Region B in October of 2023. And I said it again. Before, I'll say it again. It's just like an entertaining, fun, kind of like mid-level heroic bloodshed film of that era. And if you like lots of shooting and violence and chaotic kind of car chases and stuff like that, I think you'll really dig this movie. My name is Will. You're watching Hong Kong Cinema Appreciation Society, and we will see you next time.